In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro discusses the dangers of bias in artificial intelligence and how it can impact the dissemination of information in society. He highlights that AI, like all technology, is created by humans and therefore carries the biases of its creators. Shapiro emphasizes that the algorithms used in AI are designed by individuals who decide what biases should be embedded in the technology. Shapiro points out that as AI becomes more advanced and prevalent in society, it has the potential to significantly influence how information is distributed and perceived. He notes that traditional gatekeepers of information, such as the media, have lost credibility, leading to a lack of trust in the dissemination of information. With AI becoming a primary source of information for many people, the biases embedded in these technologies can shape individuals' perspectives and beliefs. Shapiro discusses the release of a new AI product called Google Gemini, which generates images based on prompts. Shapiro highlights that the AI in Google Gemini was found to have biases favoring diversity and inclusion, which often translated to anti-white sentiments. He provides examples of prompts that resulted in images depicting diverse individuals, deviating from traditional representations. Shapiro criticizes the creators of Google Gemini for programming the AI with woke biases and promoting a specific agenda through the generated images. He argues that the biases in AI can have far-reaching consequences, especially as these technologies are integrated into various aspects of society, including education and information dissemination. Shapiro describes Google Gemini as an Orwellian tool that distorts information to fit a biased narrative. He gives an example of how Google's AI responded to a question about Hamas committing rape in Israel, downplaying the allegations despite evidence. He believes that if reality sets in, Google Gemini will fail and alternatives that are more accurate will emerge. Shapiro raises concerns about the lack of decentralization in AI and how corporatism poses a threat to freedom of speech. He mentions that large tech companies like Google work closely with the government to control censorship standards and prevent the rise of alternative tech companies. He warns that the consolidation of power in the hands of a few elites can lead to further censorship and manipulation of information. Shapiro discusses the implications of biased AI in educational settings, where AI tutors may become the primary source of learning for students. He emphasizes that the biases embedded in AI can shape students' perspectives and limit exposure to diverse viewpoints. He criticizes the Biden administration's executive order on AI, which aims to combat algorithmic discrimination but could potentially be used to enforce a specific ideological agenda. Shapiro criticizes Joe Biden's presidency, highlighting his attempts to bribe voters with promises of student debt relief and his handling of the economy. He mentions Biden's email to 153,000 borrowers announcing $1.2 billion in student debt relief, which Shapiro sees as a violation of federal law. He also points out that despite Biden's claims of a growing economy, inflation is on the rise and mortgage rates are spiking, making it difficult for Americans to afford homes. Shapiro discusses the influx of illegal immigrants during Biden's presidency, estimating that over 10 million have entered the country. He mentions Biden's plan to curb migration at the U.S. southern border through executive actions and federal regulations. These actions include barring migrants from seeking asylum between ports of entry and raising the credible fear standard for asylum seekers. Shapiro sees this as a desperate attempt by Biden to address the immigration issue and moderate his policies to improve his chances of re-election. Shapiro touches on foreign policy issues, specifically Vladimir Putin's actions in Russia. He mentions the killing of Russian pilot Maxim Kuzminov in Spain as a signal from Moscow that those who oppose the Kremlin are not safe. This incident is seen as part of a pattern of Russian aggression and interference in global affairs. Shapiro criticizes the Biden administration for its inconsistent foreign policy approach, citing examples of cozying up to anti-Western leaders like Lula da Silva in Brazil, while calling for support for Ukraine against Russian aggression. Shapiro also delves into the topic of energy production and its impact on geopolitics. He highlights the importance of the United States' increased production of liquefied natural gas (LNG) to counter Russia's dominance in the energy market. However, he criticizes the Biden administration for pausing LNG production, which could have been beneficial for both the U.S. economy and its allies in Europe. The discussion then shifts to the Middle East, with Shapiro pointing out the hypocrisy of Secretary of State Antony Blinken's meeting with Lula da Silva while condemning Russia's actions in Ukraine. He also criticizes the administration's handling of Iran, particularly its reluctance to take strong action against Iranian proxies like the Houthis in Yemen. Shapiro also addresses the issue of corruption allegations against President Joe Biden and his son Hunter. He discusses the recent indictment of an FBI informant who provided damaging information about the Bidens, suggesting that this development could be used to discredit the entire case against them. Shapiro argues that there is ample evidence of corruption involving the Bidens, despite attempts to downplay it. The podcast touches on the impeachment efforts against President Biden, with Shapiro highlighting the role of the FBI informant in providing incriminating information. He criticizes attempts to dismiss the corruption allegations as Russian disinformation, emphasizing the need to hold the Bidens accountable for their actions.